Did you know that we are on a new map in this Cosmonarchy Brood War replay castover? It's going to be Keyan against the Shambler. We got the Shambler in the bottom left. He's turquoise. We got Keyan in the top right. He's beastly brown. We love that. Very, very quick scout out the gate. And this map is Terminus, a map that I had just been able to fashion. You can see here we have some silly tile blocks because I rushed this one out the door, but it's functional, and that's the important part. You will notice that there's some neutral stuff here. We have neutral crucibles, neutral pylon power fields, and neutral Kagrant colonies for creep generation. And obviously, since they're neutral, you can build on them as the other races. So those will definitely throw people for a loop, I imagine. And check this out. Keyan is trying a strat that I did to him when we were testing a new feature, which will not be visible in this particular game, but that's okay. You're going to notice that the Kagrant colony is already almost dead and probably should have been canceled. And indeed, and considering the fact that he didn't even... he wasn't even able to like start mutating it or whatever, that is pretty bad. Now, he did get some lost mining time down, but it's pretty good from Shambler to just attack, you know, 2 things with it or whatever, right? So not half bad there to just use 2 workers. Now, well, there you go. He's commenting there that he was having less success than I did. The reason I did that to him, by the way, is because I was just trying to scout his base as soon as possible, so I just sent workers there. But anyway, you will note that Droliths have extra HP and even 1 armor pen now. So that's probably one of the main reasons why that was possible, just in general. There's a Quasrock pool versus, obviously, the Shambler. He's playing Hydrock-Den. You know that he likes to do that, so fairly basic stuff. Now, the Shambler will burrow. This is a very good strategy because there's really not many ways that you would be able to anticipate this, but it's also a key way to, like, obviously, you can exit. I'll reveal the map and talk about the map a little bit, because our players are fairly far away from each other, so they actually are a little bit safe from this sort of thing. But this is the obvious choke into the main. This does not have a ramp leading out to it, so this is a one-way into a double gas low mineral base. The worker is now scouting, confirming that it's just some Zethar cores. It will be able to burrow, but it's burrowed in plain sight now, so obviously that can be dissuaded, and indeed it will be. Nothing doing about that. And he even waits a little bit of time. I'm not sure if it's enough time to know that Shambler didn't have any vision there, but that is a thing. And we got some Vorver cores and a Larvosk being placed. He's also insulating himself from any air attacks. This is a nice base over here, but you'll notice it's less gas than this base in the corner. You've got access to a lot of bases here fairly early on, but this high ground is also the source of another entrance into your area of expertise here, your area that you are trying to defend. And so that's sort of like the 2 main lanes of engagement. You'll also notice there's this upraised high ground and stuff. We already talked about that and saw that earlier. No air units coming out from the Shambler, so the Skithra core attack that maybe was being anticipated here isn't going to happen. And in fact, apparently it's a Circuith anyway, so just an insurance policy against a ground rush. It's not in a position to cover his Larvosk or his Quasrock, so I mean, unless he's being attacked by ground units. I'm not even sure if he scouted the Hydrock with his dying Kagrant. I think maybe he did. But yeah, you never know, man. So yeah, both players being somewhat passive here. I'm actually kind of surprised they're both pumping units, because you'd think if nothing's really happened, then why make units? Just go macro. But the thing is, they don't have the information that we have looking at this, right? They don't know actually all of these units are here and you know, not attacking me or whatever. So they don't have the information / knowledge that we do, looking at it with like a sort of God's eye view. There's a bit of a mass up happening at the doorstep. It won't be anticipated here. So that's kind of interesting. Like, there's no way for the Shambler to know, because he's not got a unit like stationed over there. Think he could repeat it with like a Hydra that's burrowed or something. Now the Nathracores are going to come over here and see if they can harass, but you'll notice actually Keyan just goes straight for the jugular and tries to get the military units taken care of. Now the melee units took a lot of splash damage from the bounces, or not splash, but like area damage or whatever. And the little bit of poor focus there denied Keyan from killing a specific extra Hydra. Also, crucially, Keyan didn't scout whether or not there was another base. So, and neither player has decent money to expand anyway. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, what I'm noticing definitely from this particular match is because of the distance between our players, like, you actually probably want to put, you know, a unit here and a unit here or something. You know, like if you're Terran, you put mines there for sure, that sort of stuff. But there's nothing like that, really. No static defense here is within range, but that doesn't really matter because there's only a couple of Hydras and an Izira core. A couple of deadlings, but nothing to really write home about. I'm guessing there was one of those was a Vorver core. We obviously need to have a unique corpse for that so that I can tell you guys that more intelligently. And yeah, now we have Keyan deciding to expand. It's kind of curious he goes for the mid position instead of the top right position. And yeah, now the Shambler says, no bueno. So I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe he's talking about something else, but you know, just not happy that he ended up getting owned. And maybe it's surprising for people to see Hydras get owned, but there have not been any nerfs to them, so don't worry. Now, one thing that we did end up doing, and this is actually Mystery Meat's suggestion, which I think is actually really neat, is we ended up dropping the vision range for the Nathra core and as well as the Vassal. The Vassal's even worse, it's 5, but the Nathra core is 6. They actually had 8 vision range, which was more than the Skithra core at 7, so that was really obviously just like a bug, basically, like an oversight, shall we say, which basically means you need other units with them. Vorver cores also have 6, and Zither cores have 5, so there's really not too many units in here in general that are like, oh shit, we've got a lot of, you know, vision and whatnot. There's nothing really there to scout a massive number, whereas like the Quasilisk also only has 6. Maybe that could be buffed up to 7 or something, I don't know. We can check the Hydralisk, I think that is indeed 7. But, you know, that army wasn't super expensive, maybe a little bit on the gas because of all the Naths. Nathra cores were increased in build time to, I believe, 25 seconds, which matches the Skither core. I feel like that might be a little too aggressive. I might drop it down to like 22. It was at 20 before, so it might be a little bit excessive to do it that much. But in this particular case, not the end of the world. There's a decent number of Zethra cores here, but obviously no Vorver cores means this attack could be hit pretty hard. Now they are getting sort of distracted trying to deal with the Quasis, and now there's a little bit of kiting happening. Only 4 Hydras left, so this attack will be held off here, especially with the Circuith in there, which just totally threw Shambler for a loop because that's usually the spot you would imagine a Spraith being. So these Quasis will pop that Hydra and then they'll themselves be popped, but a Circuith is on the way and more units are also already like halfway done there. So the build time actually is going to be taking into effect here for Keyan. Like it is nerfing his ability to defend himself a little bit here, but it's just the Quasrock being attacked, so it's really nothing major. You know, he can just move these Naths over and tickle them before his Quasrock dies. And indeed he shall. No immediate reaction coming out of the Shambler, but actually really poor corrections from Keyan, or an absence of corrections to not like just hunt down that Hydra. And yeah, he's just going to go ahead and eat them now. And that will be it. Well, okay. He could actually station one of his own Nathra cores here and attack because of the AoE to force the Unburrow. Obviously, this is off the creep, so he can't do what he did at the very beginning of the game. So it's kind of cheeky from the Shambler, but honestly, he just drops like a single Circuith down here or whatever, and he's good to go. This Hydra will actually scout over here to confirm there is no corner base, and so that is good information, and more Hydras are on the way. He can, of course, pincer this with, like, you know, an attack or a hold position here or something if he wants to. Some idle workers. What is the tech? Is there any tech change? It doesn't look like it. Obviously, I did note that the Shambler was... I registered it personally, but didn't talk about it, that the Shambler is expanding to the high mineral base that has low gas. Looks like he views minerals as his main limiting factor here. And this Circuith is probably placed adequately enough to defend against the right-hand Hydra. Now, the Shambler is going to scout this base, and this is pretty bad news for Keyan. He is going to have to go ahead and pin him to the wall here, which is quite possible because of the fact that he even borrows the workers, like, preemptively. I would have maybe even, you know, if you were going to borrow them, you're losing mining time anyway. I would have maybe tried to surround him to minimize the losses of your attack force. But it looks like, yeah, he's actually got a similar idea. But there's no way for you to actually withdraw from this particular position. So, and he actually loses no workers at all. Meanwhile, this Hydra is still burrowed. So yeah, it looks like maybe at this point there's a bait for an Ovaleth, which obviously Keyan can afford. He's got a lot of money. So he can do that at some point. Another Kagrit colony going down. Probably will be a Larvask. I don't know if he's expecting more attacks. Yet to be determined. These 2 workers I was warned about, actually. So apparently these are not indicative of a replay desync. It's just the Shambler being bad and forgetting them. So all good. No Ovaleth on the way from not the Shambler, from Keyan. I mean, I guess there's no Ovaleth on the way from him either, right? But we'll have to wait and see what transpires next. I'm actually really surprised that these guys have played this one so, like, not economically, right? Like, they've tried to be fairly aggressive back and forth, and this map is not really... Like, you can be aggro. You can even, you know, you can do some cheeky proxies or whatever. There's a big avenue of approach, and there are 2 main pathways into your base, so it's not, like, super easy to just isolate everything. But, you know, I guess for Zerg specifically, like, you have to, like, build a Kagran all the way out here, and then, you know, if you want to try to, like, link it up... now, it's kind of neat, because if you built a Kagran down here for, like, say, a Spraith, or even just a Larvosk, you spread creep further to this ridge, and now you can start to, you know, put static defense over there. So it's not impossible, right? But it is something kind of interesting to sort of consider. Looks like this was killed, or maybe it just canceled. I think if you cancel it, it also creates the rubble. But I obviously missed that. Keyan confirms no base over here. And, you know, now he has to just wonder, okay, has he taken the high mineral base or the corner gas base, which is basically like a clone of this base over here. And so he's just going to go for a frontal attack, and he's going to try to snipe down the Hydrock Den, and he will definitely be successful. I think even if all of the Shambler's forces immediately responded to that, it wouldn't have been enough. He had to posture his forces a little bit more defensively ahead of time to, like, intercept that attack. But that's just going to delay additional Hydralisks and other tech from being trained. It's not the end of the world. This Nathracor force is fairly considerable, so he can roll in here and take out the Spraith, force a response. It looks like the Shambler already sort of suspected that, so he'll even respond. Only 1 worker kill so far. He's even going to go ahead and snipe out the circuit. It looks like, no, he's going to react and try to go for the Hydras. Quick burrowing of most of the Droleths means that they are going to be saved. And the Vorvikors didn't do anything that fight. They didn't try to come in here and, like, maybe pick apart some more stuff. They would have met some Hydralisks, but maybe they would have done some damage. They didn't join the Nathracors either, so I think Keyan will recognize that that is a bit of a mistake, and he's just going to send them home. And, you know, return to them later on. He's stuck on the Quasrock. He's hell-bent on keeping that. However, he can go for an eye roll soon. He's got 400 gas. You need 600 and 300 minerals. So instead of expanding, basically, you can get yourself a tech center. And that's sort of how I think about it in terms of mineral cost, right? Like the Atlas for the Terrans is also 400 minerals, but it's 400 gas. So it's cheaper on the gas front, but it's more expensive with the minerals slightly, and it's just in keeping with the command center cost. So I think it's kind of interesting to think about that, because obviously it's going to set your economy behind where you could have expanded and invested into that, but instead you're investing into your tech. We are seeing the Nathracors fly over and intercept this Hydralisk. There's actually 2 Hydras. I think they were just rallied from the expansion base, but it's pretty good in terms of, like, considering it an attack force. And again, not watching his choke, pretty big mistake here. The circuits will finish, or there's, you know, 2 of them, the 3rd one on the way. So this will hang this force up quite a bit. Not rallying up the ramp, though. That's going to be a bit of a mistake, except for the Nathracors coming in to clean that up. And so not a single worker is even going to be killed. And you're only just going to slightly slow down the army movements of Keyan if you're in the Shambler's shoes. Shambler's shoes. Does he shamble in the shoes? Do his shoes, like, clop, you know, like somebody who's not really doing too much, you know, just sort of dragging their feet, whatever. Maybe that's what's happening. Now, Keyan is finna to expand. He also, again, could tech. He's at the point where he could indeed afford an eye roll Iris. And so he will throw it on the Hatcherosk, but I suspect we'll see an eye roll pretty soon, once he recognizes how much gas he has. Obviously, he has access to, you know, 2.5 or 3.5 geysers. He hasn't capped any of them, but that should be enough for him to be somewhat happy with his gas income. There might actually be too many geysers, to be fair, on this map. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that. I kind of like that this base is in a position to support the your position on the map or whatever. Speaking of, we have a bit of an expansion trade happening, where the Spraith colony is taken care of, the Hydralisk is also taken care of, and it's just going to be some worker deaths. Maybe he can just particularly attempt to... yeah, okay, they borrowed workers in response to each other. He might be able to snipe the Hatcheros, but I don't think so. The Skithracors were even recalled, and remember, Skithracors move slightly faster than Nathracors, so even this little bit of kiting is pretty good, and you're just going to see a single one of them die, it looks like. Nothing too crazy. Decent damage on a few of them. It will take a little bit for them to regen, and some of the Kagrans that were exposed from the attack have even been converted into Spraith colonies, so that's kind of neat. This base is done, but not being used yet. Nathricors on the way to respawn, more Quasilisks, but not in a position where they can actually fight the units. And yeah, look at that. We're even seeing some of the Skithricors being sent back just by some of the static defense. Not a crazy amount, but remember that they did get the +1 armor and +25 HP. There's 2 armor pen on the Skithricor, so that doesn't matter. The armor doesn't matter, but it does mean that they have to hit him like 4 or 5 more times. I guess 4 more times probably in order to kill them, which is going to be sufficient in most cases to ward them off a little bit more. Now, this creep is revealed by this burrowed Hydra, so the Shambler does know that this base exists. But if he does fly over here attempting to actually kill workers, he's going to be maybe slightly disappointed that there's, you know, not a crazy amount of them to kill. That being said, there's not a crazy amount of mineral economy for Keyan. Like, he's actually got very low saturation even in the main. He doesn't have this fully saturated, even though he is admittedly not harvesting gas. So, like, he knows that he has too much gas. There's a little bit of a dance over here. I deliberately tried to make this map so that you can't just hide a bunch of air units in corners. That's why the resources are so close to the map borders. Is like one of the things you could do as a mapper is do that, and then as a result, you can't really like abuse the thing. There's a little bit of a pause. It looks like it's immediately resolved because it's a replay, lol. No problems there. But this base not mining is pretty bad for Keyan, and obviously the fact that he just has like so few workers on minerals in general. He's spending APM to dance against the Skithricors, and as a result, yeah, like basically the Shambler wants to use his movement speed advantage to try to like whittle down the eco of Keyan. He's got a bunch of idle workers over here. It looks like these ones were finally put to task. That Hatcherosk is his main source of mineral income right now, besides his main. He doesn't even have full sat on that, actually, so... I'm not 100% sure where the Skithricors went. They went to the bottom right-hand corner. There are no island bases on this map, so you should remember that if you're trying to be cheesy and expand to island bases. Obviously, you can do that on Sunstarved, not on Terminus. And... yeah, I'm actually noticing a lot of idle workers. I know it's hard to like remember to do that, so not really a huge surprise. But the new fangled version of idle worker is going to be like oversaturating a single mineral field in the future when we actually have worker pathing and whatnot. The Iral Iris coming down first for Monsieur Keyan. However, there's a ton of gases being claimed, capped currently. So there looks to be an attempt to transition out of the current composition by the Shambler. And the Nathricors have already been out. It looks like he's just going to let this base die. Is he translating any of these other units? He's building some Nathricors, and he is getting the upgrade to the Quasrock. So he will be able to get Calculisks, which actually, I mean, they don't do crazy good against Hydras specifically, but against like Mass Air or whatever, they're going to be adequate. Now, the big scary thing here is that there's no units to respond to the big army that's massing up over here. If Keyan pulls the trigger first, which it looks like he will, he might force the Shambler to fall back with his big army, because he's basically moved out with everything that he has. Just a very small spattering of Hydras and workers, funnily enough, are present in the main, and he's not yet pulling the trigger. It looks like he's started to move some units over. Yeah, now he's going to go ahead and maybe attempt a base trade, because he will be losing this Hatcherosk. He has a decent amount of static defense here, but, you know, some of the units rallying over are basically his only hope. Unless Keyan just decides, fuck it, I'm going to withdraw. I've got this eco advantage, so I don't even need to worry too much about it. Good Spraith placement dissuades any Skithricors from doing that, but they pinch onto the main army, and that will be Keyan's ground force taken care of. So he will indeed be withdrawing, because he mostly wants to preserve his tech and his ability to produce units. This base is contributing to his economy, but his economy is worse than the Shambler's, even after the secondary base goes down, I think. And a lot of Hydras here. It's pretty scary. Calculisks are being morphed. The Vorvicors are on the scene. The Iral Iris is going to be popped here, I think, and the Leveril Pond already was, which is an expense, remember. So the Shambler is going to pull his attention away from the tech structures, but it looks like it will actually fall. So it's just a matter of, like, can Keyan wipe this army and still have enough to increase the pain? Some of the Calculisks were able to be morphed, but only 4. It's not a crazy number, and with the front line evaporating to the Hydras, I think the Shambler has done enough to win this fight. So, pretty solid play coming out from him. I still think that definitely you could see more aggressive play towards the mid-game if you actually did the eco play, which is probably a little bit more potent. And the GG is called, so there you go. No tech up even needed for Mr. Shambler. Yeah, in retrospect, so like sort of summing up my feelings about how these players experienced the map, I do feel like probably the main thing to take away from it is that the map is wide enough, vast enough, that even though it feels like maybe the rush distance isn't that considerable, the bases are more defensible than in most other melee maps that we've made or seen, and at least so far in CMBW, obviously, not really considering the default maps or the melee maps from like the Brood War ladder that are currently in play for like if you play remastered or whatever. So considering that, I think this is a step in the right direction for like survivability, I guess, or for like, you know, not just having the meta devolve into various rush abuses and whatnot. I had a nice and productive conversation with Keyan, actually, talking about like some of the takeaways from playing all the 1v1s lately. And I think we've got to a good spot where like this could be a nice 1v1 macro map. And, you know, we could still have maps like the Underwood or Sunstarved where, you know, there's the potential for both macro and for that early aggression, but it doesn't have to be the only way. And again, I don't even think that this map, you can't have any early aggression either. I think there's loads of potential for proxies, loads of potential for, you know, stuff like that. And those kinds of clever or cheesy oriented plays are even more possible in some ways on a map like this, where there's enough of a rush distance that if you proxy, or if you go like, you know, hatch first or something kind of kooky, like you're still able to respond to an enemy threat if you scout it and you prepare for it with more limited resources, because your defender's advantage is increased based on the rush distance, so to speak. So definitely stresses the importance of scouting. I think if either player had kept better tabs on what their enemy was doing, especially Keyan, they would have had more success on knowing when to move their army out and knowing how much of their army to move out. Like one of the things we saw for both of these players is that they pretty much attacked with everything they had. The Shambler kept a couple of units back, or maybe had just built a couple of units when I looked back at him while he was attacking in a few spots. But for the most part, they all moved all of their units out. And when you do that, you can't really respond to threats as adequately as you would like, unless you have also invested a crazy amount of money into static defense. But yeah, also this map would have gone very differently had Keyan fully saturated both of his bases at any point in the game. I don't think he really had fully saturated his main ever. And I think that's just because he probably felt like he had to continuously build units. But if he had been slightly more successful with his harassment raids, he wouldn't have felt that pressure, most likely. And also, if he had, kept tabs on his enemy, obviously the Shambler at least knew where the expansions were, because he had some burrowed Hydras in a few places. And I think when you recognize that that's happening, spending the 50 to 75 gas, whatever it is, I can't remember, for the Ovaleth, it's not really that much to ask, especially since Keyan had so much gas. So that's the replay. That's the map. I hope you guys have some thoughts on it. And if you do, obviously leave them there. And of course, here's the score screen. And you all know the score is 3, according to the link in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and also in the description of this video. So see you guys soon for the next cast over.